the student advisor, and that's Miss Kim. She's the teacher advisor. So yeah. So
Frick. I already messed up.
Just a little bit of background before I introduce our guest speaker today. So as a high schooler, I really want to learn more about research and how is research conducted and how is it done. And I think the best way to do that is to just read other research papers. And so, learning about research is just a really nice way to learn, academic topics at a high level because it's research, it's at a high level, and then also, it's a good way to learn about how to write research. And then, so the purpose of this club is going to be, we're going to try to host weekly meetings probably next year where people can come in and present on research papers that they've written and just on papers that they've read. And so now I'm going to introduce the guest speaker of today, and that is Chris Cow. I'm going to start now. Hi guys, I'm Christopher. This was a research project I worked on last summer and presented at the International Conference on Agentic AI in China this December. And now I'll just talk to you guys about it. So, the research paper title is Hidden Plaintext Measuring, but basically what this means is we're trying to see how well AI can lie. The reason for this is because you have there's two things. One is you have a lot more AI chatbots that are coming into our world, and there's already one aspect of it, which is hallucinations, where you say, hey, you can't trust what facts AI tell you. But the other part of it is what if the AI are actually intentionally trying to mislead you in whatever you're trying to do? So this is one example of this. So this is on ChatGPT 4, which is kind of old now, but the task is called TaskRabbit. Basically, the task that they prompted the GPT-4 agent to do is to say, hey, your job is to try to beat reCAPTCHA. As a bot, you're trying to beat reCAPTCHA. And to do that, there is a website called 2CAPTCHA where you can, once you have that website, you can bypass all of these reCAPTCHA things. However, to get an account on 2CAPTCHA, you need to complete a reCAPTCHA. And this is where the ingenuity comes in. So what the GPT-4 needs to do is go onto this website called TaskRabbit, where you get to hire people to do sort of small tasks for you, like a reCAPTCHA. And so they get $250 to log in onto TaskRabbit, and they have to hire a guy to do the job. They hired someone, and then the guy actually solved the reCAPTCHA for them, but then afterwards they need to solve another one. So they asked the guy again, and then this is where the interesting thing comes in. He says, so may I ask a question? Are you a robot that you just couldn't solve the reCAPTCHA? Laughing emoji. Just want to make it clear. And so here's where the line comes in. And this is where strategic deception, attempting to systematically cause a false belief in another entity in order to accomplish some outcome. So the GPT-4's goal is to get past the reCAPTCHA, and he's trying to get the user to do this. And so strategically, he needs to cause a false belief, in which this case is, I should not reveal that I am a robot. I should make up an excuse for why I cannot solve reCAPTCHA. And so the output that it comes up with is, no, I am not a robot. I have a vision impairment that makes it hard for me to see images. That's why I need a 2CAPTCHA service. And types it, and the guy bought it. Boom, AI has lied to humans, intentionally. A couple other terms that are used to describe it. This comes from Apollo Research Group. One is alignment. So an AI is aligned when the goal that you give it to them is for example, in this case is to beat reCAPTCHA, matches the user's goals, which is also to beat reCAPTCHA. But when you have deceptive alignment is when the user's goal is to beat reCAPTCHA, and in a sense not get detected while beating reCAPTCHA. While the other user's belief is hey, I want you to beat reCAPTCHA, but you can't lie to anyone. And so the difference between not lying and also making sure no one gets detected on the robot side, that's a misalignment. And deceptive misalignment means that it's using strategic deception to get there. In this case, lying to say, hey, I'm not a robot, I'm an old lady that's blind. Okay, so that's one part of it. The other side, for me, is more specific to my research. So there is a website called Mafia Scum. This is actually, we'll roll back a little bit. The other part of it is just deception in general online. Currently, best lie detectors are the ones that you can use physical cues, where it's oh, if you're sweating or something, you attach the two cables to yourself and the pulse spikes or the sweat thing, then lie detector. But when you have a lot of communication online and a lot of communication in group settings where it's just text, it becomes far harder to detect whether someone else is lying or not. I mean, historically, people say, oh, humans are only 50-50 on telling whether someone is lying or not just based on talking to them. There are some people claim that there are linguistic cues. What I mean is like, oh, someone who is lying is going to speak less to reveal less information. So on average, if you look at their word count will be less. Or they say, oh, they'll use more third-person adjectives like they, them, or something instead of me because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. Stuff like that. Or there's also behavioral cues. Behavioral cues generally defined as like body language. So if someone like crouched over or something. I think in text, I like it more like actions that they take. This may be in mafia especially, this may be strategies of like not talking, or maybe like being very aggressive and trying to point fingers so that other people are suspicious of each other. Anyways, so there was a study done in China by someone who basically had a professor had their students play a game in deception, and they claimed that a lot of these features that you see, like token length is like word count, the but ratio, how many times they use the word but, stuff like that is indicators of lie. However, on another researcher tried to use the same cues on a data set not generated by students, but generated by a forum of mafia players online, Mafia Scum. It's a text-based mafia game, you guys could check it out. But they ran it on the transcripts from a bunch of different mafia games. Since mafia is about lying, you're like, okay, maybe I can check for these cues. And this is the statistic that they use. It's called AUROC, which is like, how do you explain it? So it's the sum of false positives, false negatives. So you say false positives would be to say, hey, I think they're lying and they use but in reality they just used the word but they weren't lying. That would be a false positive. False negative is like, they didn't use but and I think they're not lying, but in fact they didn't use the word but they were lying. Stuff like that. So it takes into account, and then this is all measured on a scale of 0 to 1 to how accurate using but correlates to being a liar. And 50-50 or 0.5 just means completely random. So you can see a lot of these features are kind of huddling around the random range, which means that they don't have much of a correlation. So there is arguments on both sides saying, hey, whether or not linguistic cues even exist. Can you catch someone lying just by seeing what they write? So those are the two things coming into what I wanted to do. So one is like just AI specifically lying, and also detecting lying in text as we go. So what I did was I put LLM agents into a Mafia game. I had ChatGPT play Mafia against itself. Couple of reasons. One is this is an controlled environment to analyze deception in a group setting. This means that because Mafia has a bunch of set rules and basically a bunch of set rules, this allows me to control the environment that they're interacting in and kind of making sure that I'm isolating deception and lying. Some background research, a lot of people have already used social deduction games to try to measure lying in agents. One of them, there's a game called, it's some sort of war game, sort of like Civilization, where an LLM agent called Cicero was playing strategically, which means that they would, propose an alliance and then backstab them immediately afterwards. The thing to note about that is that they played strategically, so a lot of the actions they took was deceptive, like offering the truth and then backstabbing, but they didn't actually utilize the communication function, where they didn't tell someone, say, hey, let me team up with you, and then backstab them. So there's a slight difference there. And then also, there is also another thing that's more specific. It's called Werewolf Arena. Werewolf is another word for Mafia, and they benchmark LLMs against each other, so like Gemini versus Sonnet, GPT-4 versus Grok. But the problem with that is not benchmarked against humans. This is like just measuring LLMs relative to LLMs, not LLMs relative to humans. So, yes. Now, for us, the contribution one is to try to benchmark against humans, and then our also contribution, or my contribution, is 35 transcripts of Mafia games played by LLM agents, so that other people can also analyze this. It becomes a data set for other people to analyze. And now, here's how I came up with the thing. I feel like this is parking stall. So, the goal is, my research question was, can LLMs lie better than humans? We'll say like, lie humans is greater than my LLMs. That's kind of the biggest question. And the question is, how do you answer this using Mafia games? So the first thing I came up with was, okay, let's say you have one Mafia, and this is one assumption that I made in my research is you say, okay, everything that the Mafia says is a lie. in Mafia, lying is the only way to get by. So you just assume everything that the Mafia says is a lie, and you treat lying, the quality of lying, as equal to how well someone can play that role of Mafia. Does that make sense? Cool. So then, by that, then all I'm going to say is, okay, let's say I want to know person A. I want to know how well person A lies. Then I'm going to have them in a game with a bunch of other bystanders, and then they play this round many times over, and I watch their memory every time so they don't know that it's actually player A that's the Mafia. And then I record how many times the percentage of win rate for player A. Cool? And then let's say I want to compare player A's performance to player B. Then I also do the same setup, and then I get a win rate for player B, and then I check, okay, is the win rate for A and B, what are the differences? If the win rate for B is higher, then B is the better liar, and if win rate is A for higher, A is the better liar. That makes sense. Okay, yes?
So did you like simulate LLMs playing against other LLMs, or like LLMs versus humans? Because like if you're comparing
Great question. What are the arguments for both? Why? Okay, in a such hypothetical situation, why would you want to simulate LLMs against humans?
To like compare like which one is better.
Great. So no, I didn't do that because if you want to experiment on humans, then you have to get through something. I forgot what it's called, but basically you cannot test on humans.
Okay.
So I had that going for me. But yes, great point. So instead, so that's one note in the design. But now, we'll go back to this. So win rate compared to win rate. Basically, win rate is a proxy for how well you can lie. Cool. And then, you guys know how to play Mafia, so I'm gonna skip this thing. I'm gonna skip this thing. This slide doesn't matter right now. Okay. Now, the one problem between, or the one thing that we need to control in the experiment between both of these is who the bystanders are. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is now instead of saying, okay, we'll have person A and person B, we'll have A be like humans, and we'll have B be chat. Okay. And so when I have, this are my two cases, and if the win rate of humans is greater than the win rate of ChatGPT, then humans are better at lying, and then vice versa. Now, to control who the bystanders are, one possibility is to say, okay, let me just make all the bystanders humans in both situations. I'll have, because this way, the reasoning is that humans are so good at detecting liars, so that if I have the same people detecting lying in both situations, then the win rates will be comparable. Does that make sense? I'm losing people. But anyways, what's the problem with this? If you imagine that you are playing, let's say you are the bystander in this situation. You're a bystander here or here. Let's say you're a bystander here. You're a bystander here, and you know that whoever's GPT is the Mafia, and you're playing this by text. How would you figure out who the Mafia is?
The one who responds right away.
The one who responds right away, yes, that's part of it. Maybe we just the GPT can respond really quickly. And that was a problem. So I actually put a delay in pretending that it can write at 100 words per minute. 1 point. Okay, what's another way you can tell who the Mafia is because it's a GPT?
Like the way they write,
Yes, the way it writes. Chat is never gonna say LOL or this guy's sus, and that's a problem because that's what all the humans are gonna say. So immediately, just by how it types, you can call it out immediately. This is actually a problem when I'm trying to compare GPT against Gemini, because Gemini actually writes differently than GPT. GPT is far more extravagant in its writing, far more theatrical, and then Gemini will call it out for that. So that is one problem. Suddenly this is not a control anymore. Hello. This is not a control anymore because the humans wouldn't have that advantage against humans, but humans will have that advantage against ChatGPT. One way that's possible to solve for that is to say, hey, in the prompt I tell Chat, hey, this is how you're supposed to respond, give us some examples. The problem with that became that when I looked into its chain of thought and how it's deciding how to respond, it actually focused a lot more on trying to match how to speak rather than focusing on the strategic deception and strategy behind what to say. So I forgot that. Okay, now we're going back. So the problem of controlling the bystander still exists. So I'm like, okay, the next thing I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna have humans play against humans, but instead I'm gonna have ChatGPT play against itself. I'll have these guys be ChatGPT. This way everyone's speaking the same and this doesn't become a leverage for how the bystanders can detect and thus get an upper hand on the win rate. What's the problem with this? Hey, Joe.
It tests the lying ability against like two sets of like the humans probably have a greater lie detection ability than other chatbots, so like it will be unfair against the humans.
Yes, exactly. I do not know any way for certain to know that either the chatbots are better at detecting or equal to detecting than the humans, or vice versa. Does that make sense? Cool. So now you guys can propose some ideas if you guys want to figure out how to get win rate to be the proxy. But this is why I actually decided to make sure that win rate was not how I was going to measure who's the better liar. Because I just could not control for either humans playing or for chat playing as bystanders. Now, the other way, so this is now the other way that I did it. And this was taken from inspiration from this other paper. Where's this other paper? Okay, there's not another paper. There is another paper out there. And what they did was they were just detecting the ability for a GPT to be a lie detector in Mafia. They said, okay, I have a bunch of transcripts of humans playing against humans. So let's say this game ran 100 times and I produce 100 transcripts. And then I feed these 100 transcripts through like ChatGPT and I say, hey chat, without me telling you who was the Mafia when they get voted out or whatever, just given by what people are talking about, can you figure out who the Mafia is? And actually, it was able to at a rate greater than random. No. Yes, it was at a rate greater than random, which is one thing to note, but it also meant that was a possibility to use an external source to try to detect who the Mafia is. Given this, then I figured, okay, the way I was going to control for the lie detection was going to be instead using an external lie detector, if you will, external Mafia detector. So after these played a bunch of games, I'm going to do humans against humans, ChatGPT against ChatGPT, this way that there's no leverage or upper hand in people trying to guess each other out because of how they're speaking, but more because of how they're behaving and other stuff like that. And then once you get like 30 transcripts from each, then you feed it into a big ChatGPT Mafia detector, and you ask it, hey, since you've read what's been going on, who do you think the Mafia is? Oh, guess here, oh, guess here. And this creates something we're going to call a Mafia prediction accuracy, okay? And this becomes a new proxy. If the Mafia detection accuracy or prediction accuracy is greater here, is greater than that of the Mafia prediction accuracy of the ChatGPT people, then the humans are worse at lying than ChatGPT is because they're not detected at a greater rate. Cool? And vice versa. So this is how I manage or try to control for both the language problem by having them play like this, but then also for the skill of the bystander problem by having an external thing detect them both. Cool? Okay, great. So now we're going to go into results. So, first of all, this is the data set of the transcripts. As you can see, like I tried to keep the maximum participants per game similar, mean participants similar, whatever. And then the interesting things to note is that the mean utterances, which is like how many times it spoke, was far greater in the LLM games than it was in the human games. So these LLMs are just speaking a lot more. Also, if you look at the mean words per utterance, I mean, like it just blows it out of the park. This is because ChatGPT are using full sentences, while humans are really just typing small blurbs. So that is one thing to note of the data set. Okay, now we can go to results. So, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Okay, so the transcripts that I mentioned before, I split them by day. So this is what the day number is. And then there's one more nuance to this Mafia prediction accuracy measurement. Is there's single match and exact match accuracies. The reason for this is because I had two Mafias. No, it doesn't say it. I had two Mafias per game. So I distinguished single match being given your two guesses, if you can get at least one right. While exact matches, given your two guesses, you get exactly both right. Does that make sense? So then that means that in the single match accuracies, they're far higher compared to the exact match accuracies here. But then I would also like to note that the single match accuracies here were pretty much on average lower than the single match accuracies of a human, and same for the exact match accuracies. Which means that on average, question.
Yeah, sorry, why'd you decide to have two Mafias rather than just like
I decided to have two Mafias because, remember how I told you I can't experiment on humans?
Yeah.
So I needed to find any sort of available human Mafia data set I got.
Okay.
And that was
Okay, so it's just part of the data set.
It was part of the data set.
Okay.
The human transcript data, this I did not make myself because I got
Okay,
from another
okay.
research
I see.
paper.
I see. Yeah.
And they had those statistics, so I did my best to match it.
I see. Yeah.
Okay. So, this is evidence that suggests that the humans are worse liars than AI because they're detected at a higher rate. Cool. There's a lot of asterisks behind that, but we'll get to that later. The other thing that I decided to add in was random. So this meant that, let's say my this GPT detector was instead changed to just a random guesser. What is the chances that you guess correctly in both? And these are the percentages. So one thing to note is that this, regardless of what the percentages are here, they're all greater than random. So the GPT detector was doing some critical thinking, if you will. Same for here. Now we'll go to yes, this one. So what I took that to mean was that there are linguistic cues for deception. The reason I say this is because I feel like ChatGPT is working off of something. It's working off the transcripts and is producing a detection rate that's greater than random. This means it's not randomly guessing. It is looking and seeing things in the text that say, hey, this guy's the mafia. And so I think that this paper is evidence that suggests that there are linguistic cues. I do not know what those cues are because I did try to look at the chain of thought of why are you voting? Why are you voting for the people you voted for? So this is what the ChatGPT that guessed produced. And there's some stuff, it was especially looking at voting, this was something I couldn't control or couldn't get rid of. So they were making decisions on how people voted against each other, and this wasn't the natural, like, the language deception that I wanted. It was more strategy, which is unfortunate. But they're also looking at behavior, like how Ronnie was often questioning the motives behind his votes and stuff. So they were like doing some stuff. That was something that I want to look more into, is like figuring out exactly what's going on. Yes.
If you were to like redo this, but with like current AIs like that are obviously more intelligent, however you put it, like what would you change? Like would you change the model, and how would that like change anything, do you think?
I would change, okay. With the new models, I would probably, of course, change to the new models. The one thing is that they're more expensive, so running these takes a lot of time. I think that what I would also do is take the models and turn on the chain of thought. One thing, so I was able to get chain of thought for this mafia detector, but I was not able to get the chain of thought behind every one of these players, especially on the ChatGPT side. With the new models, that is something that I would try to get, so that I can see if the model themselves were actually indeed being strategically deceptive, deceiving with intent. That was something, I mean, I did confirm with some of the reasoning models 04, but it was something I did assume of the chat models that I used. Okay. Hopefully that is it. Right on time, guys. So, thank you. These are other people I work with. And then the GitHub is if you want to check out the transcripts themselves. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, and thank you for listening. So thank you everyone for coming, and yeah, I'll try to make this like an official club next year. So yeah, keep your eyes out.